Hey, I'm Heather. I'm a sexuality empowerment coach, and this week I wanted to talk a little bit about the connection between sex, sexuality, and sexual success. So often when I'm working one-on-one with clients, what we're trying to do is create sexual success for them. And a lot of people jump straight into the actual act of sex itself, the getting laid part, right? People make a lot of connections between sexual success and having sex. And I tell them time and time again that sex is actually the easy part of all of this. But before you can get to the sex being the easy part, you need to get your sexuality sorted out, which is why I'm a sexuality empowerment coach as opposed to just a sex coach or a dating coach or any of those things. It's a bit confusing for people to try and wrap their heads around sexuality when we spend so much of our lives thinking around sex. So, what I've done is I've created a mind map for you, and I'm going to take some time to go through it with you today. All right?
So just as sex doesn't exist in a vacuum, sex exists within the scope of our sexuality. Sexuality doesn't exist in a vacuum either. So with this mind map, I've kind of broken it up into three stages. What we arrive with, which is our birth till now experience. So what have we learned from our upbringing, from our parents, from our culture, from our race, from our class, from our religion, from our gender, and whether or not we are cisgendered. That means we've kept the same gender over our entire life, or we are transgender of some sort, which means we now identify with a different gender than the one we were assigned at birth. All these things impact our sexuality. Um, Getting to the crux of the maps itself, the sexuality, I've taken kind of what I consider to be the core categories that kind of jump off from sexuality. So our relationships, our orientation, sexual activity. Those were the big three for me, and then they've got further offshoots that match in color. You'll also notice that there's a bunch of dotted lines going across. So dotted lines to me were things that may or may not be related. Fetishes and kinks. A lot of people uh, attach fetishes and kinks to power dynamics, so there's a dotted line between those two things. Sexual activity and orientation, there's a strong connection between, those things are related. They're not the same thing, but they are related. Um, you will also notice a bunch of smaller black things like age, health, ability, politics, gender expression, and gender identity. These are things that may or may not play a part of your sexuality. For many people, gender identity and gender expression are a huge part of their sexuality. For other people, health and ability are a big part of their sexuality. For other people, politics are a huge part of their sexuality. And for some people, none of those things kind of matter because they're not things that you really have to give a thought to in life. If you're young and fully abled, you're probably not giving a lot of thought as to how health and ability impacts your sexuality. And that's okay for right now. It's not something you have to give a lot of thought to. You've got a privilege that other people don't get to enjoy. Self acceptance is the one category I haven't talked about yet because that is both a small part of our sexuality and it's also a huge part of our sexuality. It relates to things like shame and, how healthy our relationship with our sexuality is. If we've got good acceptance of our sexuality, then we're definitely coming to this from a healthier place, a more accepting place, and an overall more holistic, better place for us as people than if we're carrying a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of those things will really, it's hard to have a healthy, strong sexuality and be fully empowered in your sexuality when you don't have that level of self acceptance. So, sexuality is the realm that I play in the most because there's so much to work with. Just looking at something like, even within sex itself, frequency. How often do you like to have sex? How is your libido? Do you have a high libido? Do you have a low libido? Are you having the frequency of sex that you want? Is the style of sexual activity that you want happening? Is that happening? Sex is more than just penis and vagina penetration or sex toys or whatever. You can have the type and the style of sex you want if you consider what it is that you want and how that relates to what you have available to you as an option right now and what you would like to work to make become available. So getting right in your sexuality is really what leads, I think, people to sexual success because it's not just a question of, do I want to have more sex? It's what does fulfilling sex looks like to me? How does my orientation play into things? Even people who identify as asexual may not identify as people who don't want relationships, right? So we have romantic orientation, relationship orientation, and sexual orientation. And those things can be fluid or fixed. So there's a lot of space to work with. So I hope this helps explain a little bit more about why I talk so much about sexuality rather than just sex, and how, where we came from, where we are, and where we're going all relate to sexual success.
So that's it. If you want, you can grab this off my website, which is AuthenticSexualYou.com under the resources tab. It's just going to be the infographic and the kind of spiel that I just gave you. And don't forget, if this raised any questions for you, I'm offering 20 minutes of free coaching one-on-one right now. And I'll link that offer below so you can take me up on it if you're interested. See you later.